Welcome back, everyone. This is Jeffrey Reynolds at Reynolds Runabouts. I am still working on the 1955 14-foot Wolverine Ply-Lap that was made by Wagemaker Company in Grand Rapids, Michigan. In the last video, I showed you taking most of the finish off the boat, but I had these areas that were too tight for my orbital. So in looking, I wanted to double check what was going on under these decorative mahogany trim pieces. And I saw some dark spots, so I thought, well, you know what, I'm going to pull that off and I'm going to clean that up and maybe put some 5200 in there. Not maybe 52, maybe 42. I'm thinking 52 because I want it to be permanent and I want it to be sealed, and it's really close to the water line. And I'm not sure if this is original bedding compound, but it sure looks like it. It's some sort of sawdust glue combination. It might have been dolphinite, which was used widely back then for a bedding compound. The curious thing is, it's some of it has been routed out to fit. I think that must be because of the camber or the roll in the hull, which is really interesting. And then they would attach it with screws from the inside, both Phillips and slot head, which is interesting. So I've kept those, and I'll make a decision on which ones I want to replace with a new silicone bronze when I put it back, and then I'll bed this to keep it not only watertight underneath, but keep it more. It was a little loose, so the screws were okay. I just didn't want to take a chance. And then there's a piece of aluminum trim that goes over the top of this, which is probably why some of the screws were poking through. I wondered, I thought they were nails or tacks at some point, but it was just a screw coming through the back. So I removed those first and then pulled this out. I did have this one was stubborn, meaning the head was rounded over when I got there. So I pulled that out, and I'll put some toothpicks in that to make sure that that hole is meaty enough to take the screw when I put it back in. So that's what I'm going to be working on this video, is removing not only the decorative trim and then finishing the sanding, but also taking off the splash rail, which is fastened from the inside, and the, I'll call it the shear rub rail on top that will be released as well, so that I can double check under there as well and give it, again, some 5200 to make it more secure. And then when I put the stain and stuff back on, it'll blend right in with the rest of it. So back to work. Here's a close-up of what I found when I took off the starboard piece of trim to the rear. It's kind of like a flaky compound, which I've seen in some boats, you know, around the seats and stuff that were passing together. This is almost like a filling compound, powdery. I don't. It might have been applied just to fill a gap that the workman had made, or it's just a natural thing that they did. But that's what it looks like. I even kept a sample in case anybody ever runs into it. Curious to see what their boats had that as well. And then, you know, this groove, this is the front part, is, I think the groove I'm feeling is just, it doesn't have, you know, that lip of varnish and paint, obviously. So I'll sand that down. That shadow will be so obvious, and the screw holes are there. So when I reapply it, refasten it, it should not be a problem. So back to work I go. So visualize the boat is sitting on its side, and I'm taking the fasteners out of the back on the inside of the hull that hold the decorative mahogany trim on the side. And it's so interesting. You can see that the workman back in 1955 made too many holes. So you'd have a fastener here, and then there should be another one here. These were plugged from what I believe to be the bedding compound came through, and then somebody just smoothed it over. So I'll probably just do the same thing. I'll use the right fastener holes, and then I'll go ahead and just smooth the goop like they did and leave it like it was. So just so you know, not everything that comes from the factory is perfect. I'm on to picking the putty out of all the fasteners on the bottom and in the hull so I can release the screws one at a time, check for rot, and then I'll inject Smith's penetrating epoxy sealer into those and then rebed them, most likely with at least below the water line, 5200 by 3M. But in doing so, I've noticed a lot of things going on from the last restoration. Number one, somebody put in the fasteners more than likely without any bedding compound or sealer, but they put a combination of either white and mahogany 3M 5200 adhesive. It's meant to adhere things, not to fill. And I found both white version, it could be Boat Life, is another type of marine sealant more than an adhesive. I make a practice of not using an adhesive for filler. It makes it hard for the next guy, me, to get these holes cleaned out to get at the fastener heads. And it doesn't do the job it was designed to. It was an adhesive, not a filler. So what'll happen is I'll put these back in with 5200 after I seal the hull, which makes sense. It's adhering the keel, and there'll be a natural squeeze out going into these fastener holes, which is acceptable. But the heads themselves won't have adhesive on top. They will receive a marine below the waterline filling compound like Total Fair, 3M makes one as well, Alexial makes one. Those are the places you put filler, not adhesive. So I'm going to keep going. Well, that completes the releasing of all but one fastener on this outside keel. Just so you know, the outside keel is more of a sacrificial piece of white oak on the bottom of the boat to take all the abuse of the bottom of the trailer, the lake, the beach, wherever you may beach it, obstacles under the water, obstructions. So there's no fear of this boat collapsing when I pull this. There's an inner keel. This boat was built originally to be structurally sound without this keel. So again, this is just a sacrificial piece, but an important piece. So again, this is going to come off. I don't know. It might come off hard. I don't know what kind of adhesive is under there. In the past, I've had them pop right off. It was just somebody had put maybe some dolphinite or glue that had, dried out, so it came right off. And I'll check the inside as well to see if there might be inner fastenings going in to out. I'll do that. But usually they're fastened by these number 10 silicon bronze, very long. They probably go into the inner keel, it looks like about 3 inches. And I'll probably order new ones. I was thankful that these heads have slots, which allows you to clean them out and then take them out. And that's one advantage of older boats. You'll find a lot of slot head screws that allow you to clean and get them out where maybe a Phillips head would have stripped. So you don't have to take and unscrew them to get them out. So I'm going to go ahead and try to get this off and see what happens. So like in the past, it looks like there was just a thin layer of some sort of bedding compound, if at all. Looks like there's a little bit of bedding compound and then the paint from the bottom of the keel. is now here on the bottom. One thing I wanted to point out is that this is stripped. I mean, it was stripped when I got there. And this area right here, as you can see, has a problem. This is I think it's probably a factory mistake. This part of the keel is molded into the hull. So glue and heat made this part of the keel, or the foot you could almost call it, in the stem. And this was added, but this is a really big gap to have occurred over time, especially with white oak, which doesn't move. I think this is probably a workman put this on. It was a pattern, he put it on, it was short. He made it sure it was okay at the keel and the stern, but not at the up here in the front. So it was just probably filled with filler. I found it full of 5200, so it's been there a while. Somebody else just filled it with 5200. So what I'm going to do, because there's an issue here with this getting the screw out, which will mess this up. I'm going to make a new piece of oak that connects to the original molded keel so that it's correct. So what I'll end up doing is getting that out of there first. I'll cut it out, and then I'll mimic that piece with a new piece of white oak that I have, and I will put some wax paper under there when I do the epoxy correction. And then when that's dry, I will pull up the keel itself and go ahead and clean up the bedding compounded paint. And then the keel itself I'll clean up, get it fair again. I'll soak it in Smith's CPS sealer, and then I will put it back on the boat so that it's in place, and then start taking the other parts of the boat apart. There's fasteners all through this hull going out to the inner keel and other floor pieces. I will systematically take those out and rebed them, and then when I get all done, I can sand and seal the whole boat in Smith's and get this really secure for water prevention in the future. So that'll be my next step. There's also a piece of the keel that is damaged just before the stern, loose wood and rot, and I don't see anything where it came from, but it's been damaged. Here's where the roller was. You can tell by the dark spots. That's usually where a roller or a bunk is resting. This one is just broke. So this one will also get a major piece cut in here with an 8-to-1 scarf, I'll call it. And I'll cut in on an angle, and then we'll end up getting new wood in there. And after I get that repaired, like the front, I will go ahead and take it all the way off and clean it. At this point, I can assuredly work on it. I'll put fasteners here and here. That'll let me to work on that area without the keel moving and adjusting itself, and then having a problem somewhere else. So that's also in the cards. I'm not sure the stern right at the end, really an obvious place where things get beat up. Trailers, beaches, it could have been anything. This is going to get a lot of work. I'm going to dig a lot of this out and see if it's any good, and I might end up putting a nice piece in there as well. So overall, the keel is in great shape compared to some I've seen. I've pulled keels off boats sometimes because you just can't save it, and then you have to make a new white oak keel, which it's expensive, but it's also a lot of labor in the planing and getting it correct. So that's my next project. I've marked my areas that I want to replace pieces of the keel, and what I'm going to do is always try to have the leading edge be deeper because the water will flow. It's also going to allow me to shape this better because it's meeting another piece of keel. I want to have the ability to bring it up. Down here there'll be more of a hook than you see You never want to go to a feather edge, you'll probably come down ½ an inch, so you'll be flat and then it'll follow. And I will cut that all the way out, and then I'll make a piece, fit it in. Same with here. You notice I'm keeping well clear of these fasteners. This will hold the keel together while I'm making the repair. This happens to be just where a fastener was, which might have been why it was weak. And it also follows the pattern of where the deterioration is. And then lastly, I'm going to do not an 8-to-1 scarf, but a 4-to-1, because I need to get down into here pretty quickly. In here, I need this fastener to be pretty steady, and this will be epoxied, and then it'll have bedding compound with another screw. So this will be very secure. And again, I'll put a small hook there and go ahead and just try to get it to the point where it is secure. Then I'll go in there and hand plane it so that it'll be a nice replacement, and then we cover it up with paint so the next guy will see it. Back to work. The next step is for me to take my oscillating tool, follow my lines, and just slowly cut up, make sure I leave a little lip down here. I'm pretty sure there's at least one bolt or a screw that I'm going to have to get out, so this is going to come out in a piece. So I might just go right here first and then follow up. And then I'll go back in and clean that up so it's smooth, and then get a rough shape that I can put in there, put a fastener hole in, epoxy it, and then I'll go back later and hand plane that off so it's a really nice connection to this molded keel piece, and the gap will be gone, and then we'll get a nice smooth surface. And then I'll just keep working my way to the other 2 spots. So I've reached my depth, and then I'll maybe do a couple more just so they'll come off in pieces, and then I'll do this hook. And yeah, clean it up after that. So I've got the piece cut out, kind of give you a better angle. So here's the little hook I was talking about. That'll give you a better place to register the end of that scarf, and a place to glue instead of a feather edge. Feather edge down here is fine because you got a big piece, so that'll carry through, and I'll be able to plane that to a nice shape. I'll get that screw out of there. I did see rot, so again, back in 1955, that probably wasn't the best answer to leave that open like that. It got into the end grain of the oak, which, the oak is pretty good with water penetration, but not that good. So it ended up being a kind of a weak spot. So I'll get that cleaned up, and then I'll make a nice pattern and go ahead and get a piece cut out of my oak stock, and then I'll continue down and do the other 2 pieces. Back to work. You can see from I sanded this down, I took out a lot more rot than I thought was there. So there'll end up being a flat surface here as well to attach to, just because I had to get that rot out of there, and then it'll come back up here. So I'll have to put a little hook in the bottom of that scarf when I go to do it, and then it'll go flat. So it won't be it'll be a scarf, but it'll be a little bit different scarf. And I'll get up under this one, which has a little hook already. So the factory must have done that knowing that the water was flowing that way. So I'll have to put a little bit of a angle on that to make sure she fits tight, and then we'll fit it in. So off to make a piece now. Now that I've got my replacement white oak pieces cut and fit, you can see they're a little bit proud, but that's so that I can be assured that when I glue them in and then go back and do some planing and rasping, that I won't have to worry about not having enough. So that's my next job, is to epoxy those in and then put in a new fastener for each one and let them dry. I have my original piece coated with clear epoxy. You want that to prepare the surface for the thickened epoxy. So what it does, it soaks in with white oak, not much, but it soaks in. And you put that on all ends that are gonna be epoxied with the thickened. And I put it on my plastic so it doesn't stick to the keel, because remember, I'm gonna pull this up. And that will be something you don't wanna pull off. So now that I've got both surfaces prepped, I take my thickened epoxy, and it's, you know, a little bit wetter than peanut butter. And this has a silica binding agent in it for bonding. And this will help the gluing process, because epoxy alone won't be enough. You're going to want to have something with a binder in it, like silica. Sometimes we even use sawdust if you're trying to tone or a tint. So I'm going to put that on there. You're going to want it fairly thick. I don't think it's necessary to put it on both surfaces, but you can see I've got a nice, try to keep it neat, but you want to put it on there so you got a good coating. And the key is, don't use clamps to press it down. Unlike glue, you don't want pressure. Epoxy does better without having too much pressure. It allows it to adhere better because it has a thickness to it. So I got everything lined up. I've got the epoxy and the plastic where they belong so they won't stick. So that one is good to go. And I just give it a good press so you know it's down. And you could put clamps on there loosely, but don't do it to the point where it's squeezing it out so much you don't have the epoxy left. That's the problem you don't want. So that one is in place. And then you just rinse and repeat with the rest of them. The 3 pieces of white oak that I made and then inserted into white oak that I had removed from the keel because it was rotten or had splits or wasn't long enough, like in the bow. So now, a couple days they've been cured. I have the 5mm plastic under there so that the epoxy didn't adhere to the hull, because I want to take this keel off and get it cleaned up and then soak it in epoxy by Smith's, clear penetrating epoxy sealer. And then I'll rebed it with 5200, and then I'll screw it back down. Hopefully reusing the slot head silicone bronze that were in it. I had 2 that were bad, so I have to replace those. In fact, they were bolts, so they literally go through into this keel, through the hull of the boat and into the inner keel, and then there's a nut and a washer on the inside on each end. So a nice way to secure it without just using a wood screw. So what I'm going to do with this is use a wood plane, power wood plane. And yes, there's epoxy, so there's a little bit of dulling going on. With your plane, it's a whole lot better than using a hand plane, I can tell you that. And then you could, and I might use my Japanese rasp, wood rasp, to get it really close to the shape I want. And then you could use a belt sander, which is so dusty. I hate to use it. But I might just come in there with my orbital and another soft pad sanding block with 80 grit and get it down. Because it's oak, it's going to be a lot harder than some of the stuff I've been working on. But to get this correct and have it really look good in the end, even though you won't see it most of the time, it feels good to have it correct, and it'll be nice and fair. And then I'll work on fairing up the rest of the keel and the rest of the bottom before I put on my Smith's, again, penetrating epoxy sealer, bottom coat primer, and then the white bottom coat paint that I'm going to use on this. So back to work. The more I use my Shinto wood rasp, the more I like it. I used it for the first time on my Wondercraft project to shape the splash rail, and I thought, well, mahogany, it does really well. With oak, it's just as good. And if you've ever had the pleasure of working with white oak, cutting it, shaping it, sanding it, it's got this beautiful smell. And I really enjoyed just the fact that I could use a hand tool and do exactly what I wanted to do without turning on a machine. You probably could have done that with a sander, meaning a belt sander, because it's white oak, but you'll have the tendency to chew into this lower plank area, and I don't want to do that because then I have to fix it, fair it. If you use a Shinto wood rasp, you're able to just slowly, and I let it ride literally on that, and I use this existing keel, you can even go this way, as my guide, and I was able to take the high spot down, eventually getting into the shape, and then you can fine tune it. The key is find the grain of the wood that you're working with so you're not pulling it up. You want to be going almost down in the grain so that it's pulling it, and shaving it. But this is very sharp, but it does a very good job slowly and carefully, so you're not harming anything around it, but you're also getting the work done probably faster than a power tool. So if you don't have one of these, I highly recommend you get it. So I've got one side done, and I'm going to slowly go through the rest of these with my wood rasp and finish up this project. Well, that finishes up the shaping of the 3 white oak pieces I made for the white oak keel due to rot, so I'm going to call that good. The keel itself will get faired with sandpaper either before or after I pull it to have, to address the area underneath, get that cleaned out, and then put in Smith's penetrating epoxy sealer all over the hull, on the keel individually, just so it's really soaked in well, and then I'll rebed it with 3M 5200. And that probably will happen when I do the spray rail and the shear rub rail. Try to do that all at the same time. It's just a good thing to do. 3 good pieces, lots of glue and screw fasteners in, and then the hull will be ready for paint. So thank you for tuning in. Please subscribe if you're enjoying the series. Hit the like button if you like it even more. And I will see you in a couple weeks. Thank you.